This House, as WUDC Council, will ratify a constitution amendment that allows composite teams to be eligible to break under the extenuating circumstances rather than a blanket ban. I think our housekeeping rules are the same as we've been receiving from the first round to now. So I'll just appreciate if we introduce ourselves. I would like to take POIs and treat the rest of us to respect that. In the absence of any information, please try and keep time yourself because probably the only time I'll be keeping is to tell you your time is up. Without wasting much more time, Prime Minister, the floor is yours.
Okay, I just want to confirm one thing. Did we end up streaming this round, or like, no, that's not happening? Just curious. Yeah, like, are we? Are we not? Oh, okay, cool. Sorry, I was just curious. Okay, POIs in chat. Non-verbally, I'll take one from back half around 4 or 5. Very simple model from opening government. What we're going to do here is, as the World's Council, allow composite teams to compete under certain extenuating circumstances. Note, this is not all circumstances, but rather things like, first, the inability to find a partner at your institution who can debate worlds, e.g. your team is just too small. And I think there are ways to verify this stuff. World already does things like ESL interviews to verify certain other criteria, asks for supporting information, asks for documents from universities for finances. I think we could do exactly the same kind of thing here. Second, things like your partner being unable to make it or having to swap out last minute and no one from your university being prepared to fill in because the time is just too short, e.g. people become sick, or things like case-by-case bases of like just other extenuating circumstances. I think we can again put together a panel to hear all of these issues. I want to frame out one thing very explicitly, which is that this is not a motion about the best debaters in the world trying to scam their way to better partnerships. Insofar as two things are true. First, these people are very visible, and there's a lot of social stigma to doing this. When you look like a scammer for trying to get better partnerships, e.g., you probably don't want to, like, as you know, somebody who maybe is like CAing big tournaments or everybody knows your name, want to have like a Facebook post shaming you and canceling you, insofar as this has a more long-term impact on you as a person and the relationships you can form in the community. But second, often these people come from strong institutions. That's why they're good, because they could access great training and great like resources, and they often like attract good debaters like schoolies because of the legacy of wins at those big institutions. This is why you have teams like Matt and Ahmed coming out of LSE, Naomi and Max coming out of McGill, XK and Isaac coming out of Princeton, things like that. So this is not about that top tier of schools. The third thing I just want to note is that even if a lot of this stuff is true, it doesn't really matter insofar as good people will win on either side, e.g. because of rep, because they can feed their partner the case, things like that. Our case is going to be about the mid and lower level groups of people getting more people in the door at Worlds and allowing greater accessibility. So first, we're going to tell you why we get more people in debating. Second, why we get better mid-level competition. On that first argument, more people in debating. Right now, a lot of people are locked out of Worlds. And the reason for this at small institutions specifically is that you have massive problems in generating partnerships. So you have a lack of reliable partnerships that can train for Worlds insofar as your team is smaller and has less mechanisms of enforcing cohesion and promoting training because it doesn't have as many opportunities. You have a lack of people, which means you have more issues with things like Worlds insofar as when you have fewer people, it is more likely somebody will have a visa issue. This is especially true in developing nation teams insofar as often the passport is weaker, so it is more likely that this will be a problem. You often have a lack of people who will put in Worlds prep insofar as, again, you don't have like a legacy to prioritize, right? You don't have people saying you can be the next champion, so there's no reason for you to work. You have a lack of people with money to go. If the university won't subsidize your team, you often can't access good partnerships as a result of this, and there's often no way around this, right? You can't just make your teammates happen to be born wealthier. You often have dumb luck issues. What if one partner gets a job and has to do it, or gets sick? And note, all of this is true even if you have people, because you don't necessarily have people who will do Worlds because of how much of a time commitment it is and how the issues are often non-negotiable things like financial issues and visas. And this is super common at small institutions because one, you have a lack of institutional support for debating, right? You don't have substantial funding from the university because they haven't seen wins in the past. You don't have a legacy to uphold that makes people proud to debate and put aside an enormous amount of time for that team. But second, debating is kind of strange, right? Many people don't care about this thing. It's not as proximate as like that internship you can do. So there are not many good reasons for people to stay committed to the team. It is very easy for them to drop off. And opt here cannot run like, oh, you can just partner with a novice. Because the issue with that is that either people don't want to take that option because it's such a commitment, right? Like we're putting in all of this time and money. So if we lose, that looks really bad for us and feels really negative because of the investment we've made. So people don't want to like do worlds if that's the alternative. But also, it's unclear why that alternative would be good for worse debaters or like novices who are pressured into this stuff, insofar as the enormous mental health burden on them of having to like get to that much higher level in often a much quicker amount of time when they have to replace somebody in a partnership is probably a lot of stress for them. This means people get locked out in op. The opening up that happens on our side is that you allow people to find partnerships in two ways. So one, people know that they can get partnerships, so they often join the team in the first place because they know that when it comes to the biggest competition of the year, they will not be locked out of competing just by dumb luck. But second, more people can go to Worlds, right? Like literally, you can definitely find partnerships because you can network with almost any other institution in the world and you can find somebody. The impact of this is three things. One, accessibility. Like you can just send more people to Worlds from more institutions across the globe. And the Worlds Council cares about this a lot insofar as it ensures more funding for the tournament because you have more teams that go, more diversity, right? Many debaters have a revealed preference for being progressive because of the social circles they come from, and setting a legacy, e.g. first world to have first world to have a team from X contingent or Y institution. But second, you have the comfort of joining the team in the first place because you know you will have a partner for that largest competition. The World Council cares about this. Getting more people into debating in the first place creates that more diverse community. Third, you have cross-team collaboration and funding. And this is crucial because A, institutions now have an incentive to help other teams with their prep more because you can collaborate with them. But B, you have cross-subsidization of funding. You can have a richer institution work with a smaller one to fund their world slot as a joint team. POICO.
This motion applies to the top 36 teams within the world. That means this is about the very top people you are not talking about, because it is obviously true that if you couldn't break, then this didn't matter within the first place.
No, this is just not true. The motion applies to anybody who's competing at Worlds, and I already explained why this stuff doesn't work at the top. Okay, second argument very quickly, mid-level competition. Mid-level schools and lower tier schools often can't compete right now because they attract fewer good people. So often, one, you don't have a great legacy, so you don't have like schoolies choosing you, so there's less of a pipeline of good debaters. But second, you lack funding and support, which leads to a lack of training or coaches or connections to like develop your good debaters, right? Your institution will like fund basketball more or something. The difference now is you can partner up across schools so you can have the best people from a couple of mid-level teams work together. This increases their wins in two ways. One, suitability. You can get the best partnerships, but also if you're a small team, you don't have to only put two people who are technically good debaters together. You can make the most effective pairings based on the skills that people have that mesh well as partnerships. But second, cloud. If you can put two reppy people together, more people respect them, they can get more help around the circuit, they can advance their training more. The impact of this is four things. One, more program funding. You can get more wins to show to your administrators to justify keeping the program alive. Two, more prestige. When you win, it allows you to recruit people, make the next generation of debating better for your school. Third, retention. People stay more on the team when they are more competitive because they see more like of a reason to stay because they can justify it. Four, better partnerships mean more resources for your team. When a couple of people advance, they get more skills which can be passed down to make the next generation of debating much, much better. Very proud to propose.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister, for a fine speech. We now have the Leader of Opposition.
All right, assuming everybody can see and hear me, I'll take POIs in the chat, or I'll try to take one at 5. If it gets over 5:30, then you can try verbal POIs. Okay. Starting in 3, 2, 1. Look, I understand a lot of what we've just gotten from opening government, but I have two major questions that I feel like just were not answered, right? First of all, why does this need to be at Worlds? Composite teams can compete at any other competition, including major competitions like this competition, for example, that has a significant break and significant opportunities for development, right? I have no idea why this needs to be at Worlds, a highly competitive event where people train for months in order to be able to compete, right? And the second is, I don't know why they have to be break eligible. The whole point of this is for development for people who are unlikely to break in the first place, because we're talking about like less experienced debaters, and because debating is a sport that requires a lot of practice and requires a lot of experience. I think that it's fair to say that these people are like the ones who are, if they break, are going to break like quite low or are unlikely to without a significant amount of work. I don't know why they need to be break eligible in the first place. I feel like you get their benefits on both sides of the house. All right. Why our case here is going to go through 3 points. First of all, why more teams are going to compete composite, and yes, I believe that it's likely to be at the highest level. I'll tell you why. Second is that this policy is going to be unevenly enforced, and the third is about delays and organizational difficulties that just make world worse for everybody. Okay, number one, more teams are competing composite, right? I think that this is likely to be at the highest level for 3 reasons. The first is because the longer that you're in debating, the more people you know. Yes, when you're like in your first or second year of debating, you probably know a couple of people from other institutions, but not well enough to just call them up and say, hey, do you want to commit to 3 months of debating together every single day or like every week to go to a world competition, especially when we're talking about the last minute, which is one of the conditions that was outlined in the MAC, right? The second is connections with the OrgCom to be able to request that team slot in the first place. I doubt that this is something that's going to be advertised particularly highly because it's not something that is particularly good for organization. I think it causes a lot of problems, which I'll get into in my third case. So that means the only people that really know that this is an option are the ones who know the OrgCom, who know the circuit and the way that this works and know that this rule change happened. It's a constitutional amendment. Most people who are like in their first and second year of debating and who aren't competing at the highest level probably don't even have any idea how the structure of world organization works, and so don't even know why this would that this is an option in the first place. So you just lose your accessibility there. And the third is that these people are just way more dedicated to breaking beyond one break. Like if I'm somebody who has been competing for 3-4 years, it's my last year of debating, and I just I want to win worlds, and there is nobody at my institution. Everyone else that was like particularly good at my institution has just graduated. There was a lull from COVID, which means that there's nobody the year above me. Like I think that I'm just like very likely to consider going outside of my institution to be able to get that break, especially when it's my last opportunity. Because yeah, like I do think that a lot of very talented debaters do come from like high prestige institutions, but a lot of incredible debaters also come from like schools with like without a significant amount of other people that are competing at the same level as them. And I think at the point where your goal is necessarily to break, that is way more likely that they're going to be able to attempt to do this, right? I think also these, yeah, you're just able to choose from a much larger pool, so you're more likely to do well. So I think people are likely to request this because I do think, like, I think that this mechanism that we get here about like social stigma is just probably not true at the point where, one, I don't know why people even know the circumstances upon which like this is being decided. I think you can just tell people that there was a like last minute team swap or something like that. And I think you're able to like have some evidence without it necessarily being enough to justify it. That is going to be accepted, which brings me to my second point here about how this policy is unevenly enforced. Look, the Worlds Committee, the conveners, and this council, they're interested in a high quality break. They want really talented people to be competing because it increases the prestige of their event. So when an institution is hosting internationals, the whole point is to have it go incredibly well and have, you know, a lot of like, because you're able to get a significant amount of funding in prestige from that, right? But there's also a team cap on international comps. We can't have every possible team of people who have been doing this for about 6 months who have decided that they want to team up with somebody that they met in freshers week at a different university and come compete together. There has to be some level of prioritization that the council is making. And at the point where they want a high quality break, and the priority is to have people that they honestly already know they already know these team names and they know that they're going to do well, or at least, are nice to be around because these are still people that have connections within the debating circuit, right? I think when this prioritization happens, it's just really likely that the people that are prioritized are those who are at the higher levels of the competition. So I think that all of this premise that we get from the PM is just taken out of the debate, right? Why is this policy unevenly enforced? This is a global competition run by students with minimal major event organizational experience, right? There's a lot of people who are DCAs or lower, like newer members of the council who just don't have any experience at all that are probably in charge of making a lot of these decisions, right? And I think that it's probably unlikely to go to the highest levels of the organization because, like, why would you have that something like that have to be represented by like whoever is like the one person in charge, right? So I think that you just don't have a lot of experience when you're doing this. So I think that means that it's just unlikely to be completely objective. But also the commuters and these decision makers have personal relationships, personal motives. They want institutional success for the future of their debating club with the friends debating clubs. I think they just want their friends to do well, and I think they're more likely to prioritize them just on knowing their name alone. That's how rep works within debating, and I think that's something that's like pretty intuitive, right? And then finally, like, I just think competitors might not use this in good faith. I think people, like, for example, exaggerate novice status to be able to qualify for a pro-am break. I think this similar thing is likely to happen. Before I move on, I'll take a POI.
You're literally describing the status quo where reppy people go to prep or have been out of uni for 3 years but still debate under the name of Sophia.
Yeah, I mean, this is just going to make that worse. That is literally saying that, improving my analysis here about why people are likely to engage with this in bad faith. And why this is unlikely to go well. This is just adding another qualification where people are able to get away with this at the highest level of competition. Why is this actually important? Getting to the impacts here. Number one is less development. We talked about development, opening government talked about development. I'm going to tell you why it's actually significantly worse on their side of the house. Because your priority here is moving away from institutional long-term success, and instead you're going for individual and short-term success. If you have the top debaters in 2 mid-level competitions that are debating together, guess who's not able to compete then is the people who are like slightly below them that would otherwise be paired up with them in a pro-am, right? Why would you have any pro-ams at the point where you can get more institutional success by pairing up your top debaters with people from other institutions? And I think at the point that this makes the break more interesting, and all of the reasons I've already given you about why this is unlikely to be engaged with in good faith, I think that this means that you're just unlikely. I think you're just way more likely to have this done particularly badly. Why is this important? It decreases the quality of debating over the next 3 to 5 years because nobody is getting experience in an actual international except for the people that are about to graduate. So either we get a bunch of 30-year-olds who are the only people competing in worlds, or we just have no quality of competition. And that's really bad for institutions that do debating because you get funding from success. So if we don't train new development, literally debating is going to lose funding across the board. I think that's probably a really bad thing. For that reason,
Thank you very much, Leader of Opposition, for a fine speech. We now have the Deputy Prime Minister.
Okay. I hope I'm audible and visible. Yeah. So I'm gonna start my speech in 3, 2, 1. The first thing I want to do is to address the question that was asked to us. Why does this need to be at Worlds exclusively and not any other competition? The reason for this is because there's a uniqueness to Worlds that makes it the most important tournament that people often participate in. This is true for 3 reasons. Number one, historically, all the videos of WUDC rounds you've seen show where people show how amazing debate can be. These are people that you probably value and care more about as an individual. Number two, socially, it's seen as the most important competition in the world because it's literally the only space where every good team in the world competes. This is the echelon, the top level of debating that gives it a unique value compared to any other tournament that you have. Number three, institutionally, when you're convincing administrators to fund you, it's hard to justify octo finalists at some random competition or it's Heart House Open even. But ranked top 50 in the entire globe is obvious and easy to understand regardless of who you communicated to, meaning that all of our impacts on getting funding probably only materialize into this. But if you don't buy all of those reasons, it's also the fact that all other majors often look to Worlds as setting the precedent for any other policy changes, i.e., this often means that things like participation, accessibility are often set by Worlds anyways, which is why it needs to start at Worlds. Let's then move on to the case brought by OO. The first thing that OO says is that top people will exploit this, right? So the first thing I just want to say is that this is already preempted. There's no delta with top debaters, like, for example, world champions or world finalists. This is true for a variety of reasons. Number one, our policy already excludes this. This is because if you're a top debater, chances are, and in all likelihood, you came from an institution with massive amounts of resources, with massive amounts of legacy, which means you already attract talent to begin with. So you attract like WSDC schoolies who are good, which means you have the option to find a partner. Given that the extenuating circumstances part of the model says that this only applies in cases where, for example, you cannot find a partner, you're automatically excluded from this model to begin with because like you have a partner to begin with. You have really large debate teams, so you probably aren't counted in this. Number two, they say, and the response to this, people will not enforce our policy because they care more about rep. The first thing I just want to say is that if you come from a really large institution, this becomes really obvious, right? If you come from LSE and you try to tell people that, I am partnering with someone from, let's say, Cornell or someone from, let's say, UCL, it is glaringly obvious that it is a violation of policy insofar as you are from a well-renowned institution to begin with. But also, people pry into this, right? Like people look into this to begin with. But what we prove on our case is that even if, like, let's say the CA doesn't enforce this, the debaters themselves don't have any incentive to abuse this policy. There are quite a few reasons why. Number one, social stigma. You can literally be canceled insofar as people see you as exploiting the policy. The response we get from opposition is, but this unknown to people because this occurs behind closed doors. But the problem is, the moment people see this in Worlds and the moment they see you becoming world champions with, let's say, another composite team, people pry into this because it's glaringly obvious if you are really talking about top levels of competition. This means that if they're claiming this applies to top level rooms, then all the checks against optics probably apply more on our side insofar as it's more glaringly obvious, making it so that you probably don't do this. But number two, I just think the gain from, like, I don't know, Naomi Panovka partnering with some other top debater is probably super marginal. The reason for this is because even if you get a composite team, there really is marginal delta in terms of your chances of winning. There are two reasons why. Number one, regardless of whom you partner with, you already carry immense debate rep, which makes judges more hesitant to give you losses anyways. So you'll still get to, maybe like you don't get to finals, maybe you get to semifinals, right? But that's so marginal insofar as you can already get there to begin with because of the massive debate skill and rep you already own to begin with. But number two, you can still do things that is feed your partner cases regardless of who it is. So I don't think the change is super marginal. But number three, like if you cheat, let's say a top debater cheats, then another top debater will probably also cheat. So it probably makes it like symmetric at the top level. This means that there's probably no delta at the top level teams to begin with. This means that the delta is probably with small to mid teams in this debate. And look, we're not going to be dumb. We're not going to tell you that like some random debater or some mid-tier debater will probably become WDC champion. That's not the goal. The goal is about either A, getting smaller teams the chance to even compete in the first place, or B, allowing mid-level teams who maybe never had the chance to break, to get to octo finals, maybe have that chance now to begin with, right? What does Eli prove to you? Number one is accessibility. That you have smaller teams, people who go to smaller schools participate because maybe they don't have the large teams that other schools have. Why does the WUDC Council care about this? Number one, money. You get money through things as, for example, registration fees to allow you to operate. Number two, diversity. Given that you are probably in a debate circuit, you have a revealed preference towards prioritizing progressivism and things like that. Number three, legacy. Insofar as if you're a WUDC Council that's able to brag that this is the first ever world in which we got this many people from this many parts of the world to participate, that is an ego boost to you as an individual because it proves how much of a change you actually set in debating to begin with. Before I move on, go ahead, closing.
The problem is this motion is just about being eligible to break. On the R side, they can still compete and exist and be over there. What is the value of any of your benefits when it's just about being break eligible, but they can still be at the same comp?
So because no one would even participate in the first place if you have no chance of breaking, because it's first hard to justify to administrators if you cannot even succeed to begin with. But two, like if you're a mid-level team, why would you expend all this effort to do so? Our side proves that if you're a mid-level team, for example, that you're able to now have the chance to be able to participate and compete and go maybe with another mid-level debater to give you a chance to break to begin with. Like all of that translates to membership because no one would try to participate without that. But two, the second part of our extension is mid-level teams, right? It gives you the chance to break and all of those types and like improving quality of out rounds, you get more people praising and things like that. How do you weigh this compared to everything they talked about? The first is this magnitude. Assume that, yeah, we're wrong, that maybe like top debaters continue to win more and continue to like exploit the system. The problem is that, yeah, like what's the gain? Like maybe these top debaters continue winning and things like that, but like that's probably marginal to begin with. On our side of the house, what we change are the smaller and mid-tier teams who are able to now access worlds to begin with and who have a chance of actually breaking. This means that the marginal effect on our side of the house is probably larger compared to theirs, and actually attacks the core of the motion. But number two, on relevance, we also prove to you why this actually is what's most proximate to the WDC Council. Because all of our arguments about access, about mid-level debaters being able to compete and like chance to break, means that they get more money from registration fees, means that they get more diversity, which means that they can probably tell other, like set a legacy as a World's Council that was able to get as many people from from around the world. Being the first like council and CA team to be able to do that probably gives you massive amounts of like legacy power to begin with. All of those things are absent on their side. They have to prove why there's any delta whatsoever, given that we've already disproven that. For all those reasons and more, very proud to propose.
Thank you very much, Deputy Prime Minister, for your very fine speech. We'll now have the very final speaker for the open house, Deputy Leader of Opposition. The floor is yours.
Just checking that you can hear me. I'm good.
Yeah, you are very audible.
Whoever's the Eiffel Tower icon, could you just mute because I'm hearing noise? Okay. Okay. First, I just want to quickly go on like organizational delays, which is a case that my partner didn't get to, and then finish like by pointing out that development of these small institutions is probably more likely to happen on our side than a few of us stuff. So first of all, I think it's really like delays. It's just very intuitive. If I turn up to the comp and like something has happened, I think it's probably difficult to get evidence very last second. I think this just means that you have to deal with the CA team, the conveners, the tab, because you have to change the tab. I mean, this is especially when the worlds and all this needs to be cut on a very tight schedule because you've got catering, you've got dancers, you've got like boom spots, you've got this whole thing. When a lot of these people, these things happen, when like maybe one team thinks, oh, maliciously I can try to like game the system by like making a fake flight, doing something like it just increases the incentive this happens. I think this can cause a lot of chaos on the day of the comp. I think when you have a blanket ban, it just stops all of this from happening. It just means that there is least likely to the delays. I think delays just worsen the whole comp. It makes the organizers look worse. It makes all the outside publicity look way worse. Like you're gonna like worlds like they invite like leaders of your country. When you look like you floundered in front of your country, I think this is really bad. I think this just means that Euros teams are just a lot more skeptical. Second, but also what's important is when we say it's unequally enforced, it doesn't even need to be the top debaters that it's unequally enforced. Like I think even a mid-team, when they don't get, let's say they actually legitimately have it, or they, at least they perceive that they have it, they don't get access to this like rule. I think they're just likely to go on unserious or serious debate posting and raise a storm. They're likely to clap talk the event. They're likely to like just cause unnecessary drama. When they see other teams that got accepted, maybe they don't believe that they were justified. Other people might not believe it was justified. Even if it's just a mid-table team, they might be like, oh, this I know that there's like a novice at theirs that's actually quite good who could probably do it, but like the guy just like pressured him into saying no because they wanted to have a greater chance to compete, because like that's probably a major incentive even of a mid-level team or to try to break at worlds. Therefore I think it just means that it just increases the level of like toxicity and drama in the debates community, and I think this is probably just a really negative thing. It means people go to less comps, it means people are less cordial, it means the socials are less fun. I think debating is ostensibly about having a lot of fun at these things. I think when you just have this added mechanism to cause unnecessary drama, I think this is just negative to the debate community. But I think there's it has a large like scale of like to long-term distrust of different institutions, which can just mean again that these that small like institutions are less like when this happens, I think even these debaters are going to talk to their institution, complain about what this like discrimination they get, and I think these institutions therefore have these small institutions have less buy into worlds because this student probably made a fuss when they couldn't get it, and they're like, this is why I'm not going, is because this thing. So I think these small institutions are more likely to have complaining in it. Secondly, I also think again they didn't really credit our like whole point where we're like these people have now okay, maybe in one or two situations there will be a novice who is unable and unwilling to do it. But I think when now I can go to another institution, I think this just means these small institutions now have even a greater incentive not to fund these programs, because like, oh, we only need one person to do it, therefore we're less likely to give money in the long term, therefore we're just going to bum you off because you have the now mechanism to only pay half a veg fee, so therefore we don't need to give you as much money. And I think this is, and you're going to do better as a second plus. That's a double win for these institutions. Therefore they're probably more likely to encourage it. They probably now, I also think it's important when they tell you that, oh, the evidence is going to be gathered from the unis and universities. I think I don't know, I think there's some debates conveners who will probably be willing, or like the heads of conveners probably willing to like skew things because they probably have an incentive to do well at these comps for all the reasons that they say. So therefore, it's probably again like these institutions are more likely to pressure novices out doing it. I think this means these institutions again have this dying knowledge. I think this means these small institutions can never grow, and then you have like small institutions that literally have to die out because their top debater refused to train someone else. Because again, I as probably even a mid-tier debater who could have a small potential of breaking at worlds probably prioritize that because usually people who are really good at debating are probably more likely to be in the last few years of their debates career. Like I don't think they're going to be debating for another like 10 years. It's probably like their last year, therefore they're most likely to graduate. Therefore, they're probably most likely to want to train a novice and probably want to break. I think this just means these smaller institutions struggle to even have that long-term knowledge, which is the long-term understanding of like what is actually needed to do well at Worlds. What is the practice schedule? Like if you know, oh, I'm doing Worlds and I'm gonna like go to like this online spy pound once a week, but do no other practice. I don't think that next level of knowledge is never passed down, and therefore these institutions find it harder. I think this means that these institutions, therefore, the next generation have less people who can go to comps, and therefore I think they just mean more of these smaller institutions die, meaning that we, on both sides of the house, I think we just get the long-term harm of these comps now have less and less small institutions because there's now like a greater pressure, again, for all the reasons we gave you of like why that there's now a greater pressure for these small institutions to only really have one good player for 1 few or 2 years. I'll take CG.
So when Pep broke last year and made the world semis, all the backlash you talked about happened. So why isn't this harm symmetric?
Because I think it just I think the more likeliness that there is for backlash, I think that's worse. I think yeah, if I could like do more stealing and more murder, I think in any debate we would say scale is worse. I mean, we proved to you that there's some form of a scale, even if it's done efficiently, I still think there's going to be some drama behind it. I think again, we point out that even if it's done well, small institutions again are like dead for the long term. But even if it's not done well, we get all the other harms of just increased like less buy into these competitions. I think that again, I don't think you need to tell me why more scale is worse, especially now it's a new mechanism that's mid-tier debaters can access. Because again, I don't think therefore, I think this just means that, yeah. But also lastly, I think again, just to clarify, these teams can still compete and all that. I think if you come late and you're ill or your partner just becomes ill, you can still find a partner, you can still compete, you just can't break, you can still have fun, you can still go to the social, you still do really well and tell your institution, look, I did this well at a comp, look, you saw me in like the top room of, because they still film the top rooms in Worlds before the breakouts. So therefore, I still think you get still like a recognition for your small institution. You still have the ability to tell what we've done is really good, to still get some level of buy-in. I don't think even, so therefore I can still do all of these things. If I prioritize that as an individual, I can still do it. I think the harm to these individuals is really small. I think the mechanisms that they give, so therefore, for all those reasons, just for the long-term health of small institutions, I think you have to go against this wacky idea. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Deputy Leader of Opposition, for your fine speech. Now moving to the second half of the debate, I would invite the member of government.
Okay, can I confirm I'm clearly audible?
Yes, very audible.
Okay, I'll take a POI in chat, probably from opening opposition. Yeah. Starting in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. OG fall out of the debate when they can see that the person is attracted only if they want to break, when a lot of the reputational changes that leads to better judging, more people coming in, more people funding debate, happen at the point where breaks happen. Not only don't they analyze how a composite team is likely to break, but two, it's unlikely that loads of teams, which is their mechanism, even get into the position of break worth thinking they will break. Because a lot of the circuits that face problems, the African circuits, smaller Asian circuits, small European circuits, never break a team when fucking 8 Oxford and Cambridge teams break, when no African team has broken open ever, when one team has broken open from Indonesia, etc. So what we're gonna do in this extension will be very simple. We're just gonna prove that composite teams happen on both sides of the house, but on the opposition side, they happen in an unfair manner in the Iona circuits and such, tearing the council apart and preventing it from doing its basic stacks. Then I'm going to prove how we better achieve the goals of like the diversity and stuff when only one team breaks, and why it's like that at least one composite team from a developing circuit will break. Rebuttal to all will be integrated. Why composite teams will happen on both sides? Two pieces of framing. One, that they will happen. Two, that they will happen unequally. Why will they happen? I think historically institutions or fake institutions you can join exist throughout the world, PEP, etc. But they also predominantly exist in Europe and in Eastern Europe. Or after the fall of communism, many private institutions that have low barriers of entry exist, and you can just join there for short-term courses. But two, there's so many institutions globally, it's hard to check. There are things like short-term courses, remote PhD courses like the ones that are offered by the University of Sofia, and a lot of the Sofia people take so that they're eligible to go there. Why will this happen unequally? One, I think, is just trivially true from the examples I gave. But two, notice that to defend a lot of these entries, you probably need people to defend, people to not call you out. People will be like, hey, that guy's a good guy. Why should I call him out? He's given me 3 workshops. These people tend to be, as O correctly characterizes, exactly the people with rep. But 3, I think just at the point where it isn't public information, you can do it. When it is through back channels, the people who are more connected, who have talked to Harish and know how the PEP scheme works, these are exactly the people that find out. And I'm sorry to say it, they'll be predominantly the people, maybe on the American circuit, probably on the Iona circuit. Cool. Let's characterize the WDC Council a bit. Very simple. I think it's made up of reps from individual circuits, and there are multiple caucuses and circuits, and they normally work together. Why will a composite teams distributed unequally lead to tears in this council? One, I think the unequal distribution will lead to parts of the councils trying to defend these under the hand things, so like the Iona, the Balkan circuit, etc. So there'll be direct fights because there are teams asymmetrically trying to use this. Two, I think it perpetuates a lot of other grievances and power structure. Grievances that circuits that already have rep get away with more things because here is a circuit with more rep getting away with another thing. Things like colonial structure, racism, and going against WGM, because a lot of the institutions here are from countries that have historically had colonial empires. A lot of the people with more connections, because social biases still exist, predominantly tend to not be WGM and predominantly tend to be white. 3, I think the circuit itself and the council is already polarized. Look like events like the boycott at the Cape Town Worlds. Look at what happened at NAUDC when the Americans decided to be funny and blocked the whole tournament up. So I think what happens and how this looks like is people disagreeing at the council, not passing stuff, not checking a WDC bid, delaying a WDC bid, not picking a good CA, having fights in between themselves, etc. How do we uniquely fix this terror? 3 things that are directly engaging with O. 1, you create the criteria to check, aka there's a checklist of what a team that is legitimately acting as composite, how you check that the person doesn't have a partner, stuff like that. Why is this good? Because I think the capacity to enforce does exist. It's not that big. Like we checked thousands of people on the ESL lists, on the visa list already. The CAs and DCAs are selected to be the most competent people. Language appeals committee have people pretty good like tech, etc. But also the community can better enforce when guidelines exist, and the fighting on the base serious posting is not to push like your view of what is correct, it's just to check if something aligns with something else. So the community callbacks I think will be fair. Insofar as a lot of people already hate Oxford as it is, they'll probably be biased towards the circuit that actually need it and actually deserve it. 2, I think there's a change of perception when it's legal, up until the point where you can create pages, you can advertise, you can use things like we've had previously with the forums for POCs or for WGN. You can have a forums for accessibility, including this. You can advertise this, you can have workshops. This is the missing step about how many teams find out that always challenging OG with. What are the benefits of preventing this terror? And why do they outweigh opening government? 1, I think you get worse majors when you get less checking and more infighting in the committee. You don't put the best people, you don't take the bids, etc. Not only is this a bigger loss of money than you don't get 1, 2, 3 or extra teams, but the rep you lose is huge. It's not just the change of how accessible your tournament is. It's literally good if if large slate of people, if Oxford sends 8 teams or 4 teams, if the people who have the rep use the rep. 2, I think many amendments can be passed. At the point where the goal of the council is to legislate and create committees, it goes against its own role. 3, I just feel people feel unsafe when Iona keeps getting away with things, and people who want to actually have proposals for inclusions preemptively don't do them because they feel the space is unsafe when this unfair composite teams happen on their side of the house. I'll take a PI.
At the point where the barriers for extenuating circumstances are the same for everyone, and there's a team cap enforcing priorities, I just don't see why the bias that you're already talking about that exists is not.
Because I think because you have to also engage with the OGTs. I think it's simple in framing. Like it looks bad. I think in Oxford you can find a person. You probably can't find if you're the only person doing debating in your own country in South America or in Africa. We think this POI isn't realistic. Cool. Let's move to why probably one composite team has a chance to win. Look, I think there are people who miss their visas. For example, when Andrews missed his visa last year, Erasmus could have spoken with someone else from the African circuit and maybe gotten the first break. This can probably happen in some Asian circuits that have one very experienced judge, but like who hasn't been able to find a partner because there aren't that many people. Why just one person breaking and not more is enough? Because notice what happens when Milos and Yankov were first time. A lot of people in the Balkans got inspired up to the point where now 5 teams break from the Balkans. People judge these people better. So I think at the point where one composite team can break for a circuit like South America or Asia Open and get deep, that's the point where you unlock more diversity because it's literally on all the videos. It's literally everything talked about. It's literally a watershed moment. And through this is the actual mechanism to raise smaller circuits. Because we make the council work better and because our inclusion just happens on a much wider scale, which the council wants, side with CG.
Thank you very much, member of government, for your fine speech. We'll now have the member of opposition.
Great. Can I confirm I'm audible and visible?
Very audible. Yeah, you are very audible.
Okay, sorry, just give me a minute. I'm just getting my stuff in order. Okay. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1, go. 2 extensions. Firstly, on how this leads to gridlock within the WUDC Council. Secondly, in how it creates far worse publicity. One important frame. I think everyone seems to presume that the WUDC Council is an incredibly generous body whose main priority is having diversity. I do not know why they care about inequity from 4 underdeveloped groups, from 4 underdeveloped teams who are able to get access to this right now. If they cared so much about this, presumably they already would have put in a lot of measures in the status quo to have tried and help these types of universities enter in the first place, or these councils enter in the first place, would have given a lot more scholarship funding towards these underdeveloped universities in the first place. I don't think this is half as important or approximate impact. Maybe they will provide an equity panel for teams who are already able to enter, but the extent to which they ask for visas to get better, and considering how they often give far less funding to most amount of individuals anyways, right? Like reg fees are right now over $600 per team, and the ability to get scholarships is often increasingly dependent on how many companies are willing to sponsor you. So it's a small group of people. I think this is not a very important thing for in the WDC's perspective. And this motion is about as the WDC Council, so what their perspective is, right? Let's quickly take out OO. Let's be clear, if this is about top debaters, this is an extenuating circumstances. So it's like 4 teams we're talking about. I think this impact is already incredibly not very significant. Secondly, I don't know why a top debater often tends to be within a small university in the first place. I think opening government correctly proved this. And thirdly, which is like, for a small university, often the problem is they don't have enough money to fund their teams anyways. So this doesn't change their incentive very much to try and like now screw over their own people in their own team, because the issue was they never got enough budget from the university. The other argument in organizational delay, this is very minimal. You often can just set a time limit, right? The last 2 weeks, you will not take in requests like you do for any other policy. Let's then frame first why a lot of people are going to hate this, because just says it causes trauma, but I don't know why. 3 reasons. First of all, because of competitive integrity. a lot of existing teams will think that it is a specific scam because often these extenuating circumstances are decided behind the scenes, and often all you may have is the word of that specific person who was in that meeting with the CAP, or in the meeting that CAP had with a specific council, like in some instance maybe with a council, which means often you may think that is a scam. You may think that they are often violating or harming the ability for you as a team yourself to compete in the first place. Secondly, a lot of institutional pride. For a lot of mid-level universities in, say, Asia or in developing nations, they value the fact that they've taken the time and effort to put a lot of money into their specific program to try and make it very good. Or even not money, like time in the first place, right? Like people's taking a lot of time out to go and make their, spend time on training their own specific juniors in the first place. These sorts of things mean they feel a great slighting. Even if 4 teams who are able to do composite right now were doing it because they just think, what exactly is the point of this in the first place? So they hate it. Thirdly, it's obviously breaking tradition because many people are socialized to think that these sorts of stuff is incredibly important. Notice what this does. Apart from proving OO, it has 2 independent harms. Firstly, it's controversial enough to pass the WUDC Council. This is a perception harm. Even if it's just 4 teams, you have to pass it as an amendment, which means all nations often have to vote for it and discuss it. But also it means that for every extenuating circumstance, right, the CAP has to go and get approval from the council. That is what Jess has to do, for example, for Musi last year when Musi had to speak with Matt Aiden, to try and get part of Hot House. Notice the problem of this. One, even if people don't directly hate this, there is a harm of politicking. So USA may vote against Indonesia for their own one team because USA may have its own people who want to form composites and have their own application be passed. So this leads to politicking. This leads to squabbles because both of them won't have their own incentive to get their own specific, composite American or Indonesian teams up onto the national stage. Secondly, it often can lead to gridlock because it means that even if it passes, many other future policies may not pass because they're constantly angry at this, and many specific people do not like the fact that this sort of thing has happened, which means they now vote against other policies. They now create gridlock or delays on other policies in the first place. And a lot of these other policies are more important, right? Imagine hosting or deciding which specific nation WUDC should be held in is something that you do a lot less of if you perceive that nation as being horrible because of this specific policy. Forming equity panels that are diverse is something you feel that there's less necessity to do so, precisely because you've now, by opening government's own rhetoric, presumed that you've been diverse enough to them by allowing 4 teams a year because it's an extenuating circumstance to make this specific change. Notice what this then means. Already other valuable policies and the ability for the WUDC Council to effectively function happen a lot less, a far more important and proximate harm to the council than anything else. But secondly, it often makes other institutions may not want to enter. So imagine for Oxford or Harvard, the fact that they feel they are being undermined or their depth stock means that, other teams are now able to enter, like 5 or 6 teams every year are able to enter and break, despite the fact that their specific group have not taken the effort of making their specific, council have not, depth stock of not taking the effort of actually making change, means that a lot of institutions may run the risk of actually buying out. This means either sending a lot fewer teams, or in a lot of mid-level Asian universities, for example, not sending teams in the first place because they presume the WUDC Council is either corrupt, or they presume that now that there is an integrity loss that's happening for the specific WUDC in the first place, right? And everyone just asserts that there are many other teams that allow composites. I think this is also untrue. Like in many instances, a lot of specific, and also the WUDC is pretty unique, right? The OG's own analysis, which means this is where you want to show off your own specific depth stock for your own school. This means at worst, many may not even want to partake in WUDC anymore and can split and form an alternative organization. This has happened in many instances, right? Like UADC was formed firstly by 2 organizations that had previously split up in the Asian community and then finally came back together. This already is bad. The second harm, though, is it harms friends a lot more. And the reason for this is because the perception that it's being done unfairly means you will face a lot of harassment and judgy comments from other people in the world, right? Before I explain this further, opening Gaveal.
Yeah, so last Worlds, we had a council fight over 2 CA removals and a bid to give teams a 5th World after COVID. None of this stopped the council functioning then or right now. What is the long-term margin of your gridlock impact after the one hearing when you do this policy?
But you don't do this for one hearing. You have to do this every year for 4 or 5 teams who send in applications. You yourself have just said that many teams are unable to enter, so you receive dozens of applications. So you spend far more time with this than over one CA. Also, this video was unique. Like, come on, how many times have WUDC CAs have actually gone out? Let's talk about the perception on friends. A lot of times you may face harassment or judgy comments. A single microaggression can often harm you a lot. But even if it's not wide-scale harassment, some friends will distance themselves from you when you become a composite team. You may feel that you've lost rounds because judges are dropping you out of principle, right? Notice what this means. It creates bad publicity when they now go and talk about their own stories. This creates backlash because many people will think that the world itself can be toxic, that people may not appreciate this, right? Because some people may agree with this specific policy and others will not, which means those who agree with it, when you talk about your own personal personal story, how exactly you face judgy comments or harassment, how you have heard a story about a person behind your back talking against you, or a judge has dropped you. That creates backlash. It leads to more critique. It creates bad publicity because now they feel that the WDC Council is not great, which in many instances means that many instances, more teams may either buy out into the future. These impacts are far more important to the WDC's immediate priorities than the equity of 3 teams coming in. Very happy to propose 3 teams a year.
Thank you very much, member of opposition, for your fine speech. We'll now have the very final Gov speaker, Gov. The floor is yours.
Hi, am I audible? Yeah, awesome. I think it's incredibly hypocritical when a body that stands for inclusion and non-discrimination continue to perpetuate informal power structures that have been built through things like colonialism by continuing to advantage Iona teams who become composite, but unfairly punish teams from Africa when they don't have the ability to get visas. Few things in my speech. Firstly, I'm going to engage with CEO's extension about problems with regards to like discussions and backlash and like these problems with friends. Then I have a few responses to O. Finally, I'll raise Stefan's case with regards to OG and all the other things, right? What does CEO tell you? CEO tells you that we're going to have a lot of backlash now because people like really care about WDC, and when they feel like multiple composite teams are coming out, they're going to hate it a lot. Like I think the first thing I want to note is this is extremely symmetric, right? Like this is always going to happen insofar as they accept the fact that you aren't going to get hundreds of composite teams. I'm unclear as to why this is a massive tipping point for all this backlash to increase. But two, I think I want to flip this claim, right? I think when you have more transparency on our side, you're going to reduce backlash because you can give the rationale for the decision making when you justify composite teams, right? It's important to know the comparative. When you have multiple teams from Cambridge or like Belgrade debating for PEP on on opposition's comparative, you get no explanation. The reason is they go and in an informal way say, we don't have a partner now, so I'm debating as PEP, and no one bats an eye because they say they're their friends, they have connections, they have rep all of their jazz, right? And that is when you start to hate the system more. That is when you're going to get more backlash now because you feel like the WDC Council is not doing anything. You feel like simply because they're your friends, you're not going to change anything, you're not going to be accountable, and you're going to ignore it. And this happens in a very informal way on opposition's comparative, right? This is how it's historically happened. It's going to happen without this formalizing process, right? What then is the unique comparative on our side? I think when you have a body that checks these things, you're going to get a more transparent viewing process, right? So when people don't give justifiable reasons, when they don't provide evidence that the fact that they have no partner or they're the only person in the debate circuit, like that happens a lot in like these smaller London universities, and they give evidence that they don't have a debate circuit, so they have to participate with like conjoining with UCL or LSE. That is when you get access, and that is when you get less backlash. Because even when the CAs are questioned, even when you have shit posts like posts going up and backlash being created, you have evidence to justify your decision making. The comparative they have to debate is not this ever happening, but the comparative is a lack of transparency and a lack of like a formal process that you have no information and you have no strong justification, right? The third thing I want to note here is that like in most cases, like this is this problem with regards to like squabbles between friends and like all how this could like create toxic environments, right? Like I'm unclear as to why this is in the interest of the WDC Council. Like I don't fucking care as a WDC Council, but like what my friends say. But two, if it's so harmful and you're going to lose friends, I'm unclear as to why so many people will be willing to create composite friends in the first, like composite teams in the first place, right? Because if the harm is, losing friends are so important and it's mentally harmful, why would people fucking lose friends and do these shitty things and they have the option of going and speaking with someone in their own institution, right? So you only do this when you have no other option, you can justify it to your friends and like your people who you care about, like not hurting their feelings, to say that, okay, I have no partner, I have no institution, hence why I'm trying to do this, right? I think this engages primarily with majority of CEOs pushers, right? I'll weigh off against our extension with that later on. So then let's go to right? Few things they tell us. They say, like you're going to get like dozens of multiple like composite teams, how it's going to be a massive problem, all the backlash. I think majority of the responses I've given already engages with that. I think like the framing of why the incentives of most teams are also engages with that, which means it's only going to happen in extreme circumstances, right? The second thing I want to note is it's like how it's unevenly applied and how it's going to be like it's going to perpetuate the power structures, right? I think this is also empirically untrue. Then you have a formalizing process, right? The reason why right now it happens in a very Iona-centric way is because it's informal. and you have no mechanism to keep check, right? But uniquely, the WUDC Council is very different, right? It's very diverse. You have multiple caucuses which balance each other out. So if you're making a formal decision-making process, that is when you get the check and balance. When it's informal, and when you know one of the CAs, then you can text them and say, I'm doing worse, just give me a pass. There's no formalizing process. You pass that message on, there's no accountability, there's no check and balance, right? That is the unique mechanism we have on our side. You have a formal process where you check and you check the viability, you check the evidence, then you have a balancing caucus because WUDC Council is very unique, right? The final thing I want to note with regards to responses to is this problem of like, okay, you're not going to have any proams and like how you're going to like really harm specific uni debating because like no one wants to do proams and all that. Like one, why do proams at Worlds? You can do like proams at every other fucking proam comp in the world, right? Like I'm unclear as to why this is a unique benefit that you get from Worlds. Two, like in majority of the universities, you have requirements when you go for majors, right? This is having WGM criteria internally. This is having novice and development criteria internally, right? So that means that even if you don't do proams, most novices get an opportunity to participate in WUDC because of university criteria to include like inclusivity, right? And give people a chance because universities want inclusive continuity, right? So if your first year does worse once in their first year, and that is going to give them a chance to do well in the next years, you as a university want to do that because you want to do well in the long run and you want continuity, right? Finally, then weighing off Stefan's case before that,
even if you do have these quotas, you're still having your best debaters being paired with other people from other institutions. That means that you don't have the people that are actually needed to teach people how to do an international, which is its own particular skill set, and the amount of practice you can get.
This is built on an assumption that you have no good debaters. Two, I'm unclear. Like you have to engage with everything that's happened in the debate rather than making this claim that you're just gonna go and debate with randos, right? Like, random good people. That's just not how it's gonna work out, right? What then does Stefan tell you, and why is this uniquely important? I think what is most proximate to the WUDC Council is cohesion and being able to make decisions. I think this also engages with CEO's extension because if we prove why we get more cohesion and we get better decision making, we flip majority of the claims, right? I think the reason why right now you don't get good decision making is because you divide the council based on regional ranks, right? When you continuously see that like WUDC teams from Iona gets this pass and they continuously have composite teams, but the moment an African team doesn't get visa, they aren't given that pass, they aren't given the ability to break, so hence they most likely won't participate. That is when you rupture the council. That is when you don't have the capacity to make good decisions and you don't have cohesion, right? I think the harms of this are very important. Like one, when you basically get gridlock, it's most proximate to you as a council. If you can't make decisions, you can't do anything that is beneficial for you in the long run, right? Two, I think Stefan gives you all the reasons as well, right? You fuck up words, you have bad quality words, right? I think this is important because this weighs off against anything from OG, because OG's benefits of like proximity, of like economical benefits. I'm unclear as to why this is so important, right? Worse, you think you get 600 teams. I'm unclear as to why when you get 602 teams, why it's such an economical benefit, right? Two, like I'm unclear as to why majority of the teams will get access simply because you can break, right? Because all the accessibility problems they talk about are symmetrically applying regardless of this big accessibility. Thank you.